Before we get started, won't we start off with a word of prayer? Dear Lord, I want to thank you for this wonderful day. Lord, I thank you for giving us this opportunity to come here this morning as your church and look at your word. Lord, I just ask you that we look at your word and we try to take it and apply it to our everyday lives so we can be better, not just for ourselves, but Lord, just so the world can see you through us. Lord, just be with us over the next hour, and we're so thankful that you bless us each and every day. And it's through your son's name we pray. Amen. Again, good morning. This is very loud. I hope everybody's had a good weekend. I know I did. So a few weeks ago, Chris sent me a message and asked me if I wouldn't mind doing this class. It was the role of leadership in the church. The role of leadership in the church. And I kind of tossed around a few different ways to think about this topic. And I had something I wanted to bring forward, and I'm not really sure yet if I want to do it, but I think we're going to do it this way. So let's start off in Joshua chapter 22. Joshua chapter 22. And we're really going to be focusing on the verses 10 through 18 just for the next few moments. Joshua chapter 22, 10 through 18. And I had this section in my lesson titled, The Purpose of the Lesson. And, before I get going, this really isn't to step on anybody's toes or point fingers at anybody. It's just something I think that we may need to think about, as far as leadership. And starting verse 10, it says, And when they came to the region of the Jordan, which is in the land of Canaan, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a great, impressive altar. Now the children of Israel heard someone say, Behold, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh have built an altar on the frontier of the land of Canaan, and the region of Jordan, on the children of Israel's side. And when the children of Israel heard of it, the whole congregation of the children of Israel gathered together at Shiloh to go to war against them. Then the children of Israel sent Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest of the children of Reuben, to the children of Gad and half tribe of Manasseh into the land of Gilead. And with him 10 rulers, one ruler each from the chief house of every tribe of Israel. And each one was the head of the house of his father among the divisions of Israel. Then they came to the children of Reuben, to the children of Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh, to the land of Gilead, and they spoke with them, saying, Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, What treachery is this that you have committed against the God of Israel, to turn away this day from the following the Lord, in that you have built for yourselves an altar, that you may rebel this day against the Lord? Is the iniquity of Peor not enough for us, from which we are not cleansed to this day, although there was a plague in the congregation of the Lord? But that you must turn away this day from following the Lord, and it shall be, if you rebel today against the Lord, that tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. So what lessons, or why do you think I'm bringing up this scripture? And then we're talking about leadership. Anybody? Why would this be a good thing for us to read and learn from about leadership in the church?
One thing shows how they handled it back then. Not just one person, but a group of people, representatives from each individual division. How they had divisions back then, and they took representatives from each division to go and hash this situation out.
That's right. They one thing, and when I put this in my lesson, I highlighted the whole congregation. The whole congregation. They what did this whole congregation? What did they see? Ma'am?
Leadership was not following what the parts that what was not recommended.
Okay. Well, I put down here leadership cannot or should not ignore unaddressed sin. or problems, right? And another thing we should notice, it was the whole congregation. Sometimes when we think of leadership in the church, we think of what? Preachers or elders and deacons. And then, maybe some paid staff, right? Sometimes that's what we think about. But so, I want this lesson, I don't want to totally forget about, elders and deacons, and I'm not trying to talk bad about that or say we don't need them. We need them. But what we need to realize is that the whole church, the whole congregation can be leaders. We are leaders. And we should not ignore problems that are in the church. Another thing that I brought this up is we see that sin compromises the whole body. It's going to compromise the whole body or the entire congregation. That's another lesson that I picked up in Joshua chapter 22. So another question before we keep going. And what ways can unchecked sin in a congregation harm this whole congregation?
It can spread.
Spread, right? A little bit of what? The leaven. Leaven's the whole lump, okay? So what steps should leadership, and when I say this leadership, I'm talking about the whole, all of us together. What steps should leadership take when actions look sinful or divisive? What should we do?
Well, Barney Fife said nip it in the bud.
Nip in the bud, right?
And there's no other way to say it, but nip it, nip it, nip it.
What did they do in Joshua chapter 22? What did that whole congregation, what was they ready to do? They was ready to go to war. So the idea is here, we need to look that we are that congregation.
But they were careful about investigating too.
That was my next thing. We need to be ready to go to war, but we need to be ready to gather the facts of what's all going on. Because if you know this whole story, it comes to find out there was some, they didn't understand what they was doing. They didn't understand what the other 2.5 tribes were doing. But they did go, and they kept the unity. They went about it the right way. He mentioned they went and got the leaders of each group, right? And then they sent an elder or the phenist to a priest, high priest, or a priest, to go check things out and talk to him, right? So we need to be ready to go to war, but we also need to gather all the facts from everybody that's involved. We need a desire for unity, and we also need to be ready to offer help rather than just to condemn the people that may be in trouble. And we need to be ready to rejoice if it was a false claim, and we realize that their intentions were really good. And we need to rejoice.
We need to ask God for direction.
Yes.
We need to pray for direction to do things right. Too many times we've had little issues in the past that I've seen. And, it just created a big issue out of nothing.
I'm going to start calling you Austin. When I used to teach equipment, I used to ask my daddy, was he looking at my notes? Because that's another thing about, we need to pray. If we notice there's problems going on in the congregation as leaders, we need to be patient and wait. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, maybe in Acts, where we see that,
To borrow from your Joshua 22 scenario, and what Elwood is saying, both of these sides went into, 2.5 tribes on the eastern side of the Jordan, and what's that put it, 11.5, 9.5 or whatever, 8.5 on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
When they show up over here, here's a really powerful lesson. They both concluded that this was okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it is important and imperative to nip it, right? But, if we seek wise counsel, like El was saying, we'll also see that, the guys on the western side of the Jordan could have just as easily set up an idol, or not an idol, an altar, is what they call it, an altar of witness, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. And they could just as easily set up an altar of witness facing eastward. Right, to remind them that, hey, you have family over here.
That's right.
So that door could have swung,
both ways.
Both ways, and they just didn't come up with it. And so, in leadership, you've got to see and understand through people's eyes that we're all, if we're all bought into the idea, I mean, the reason why they did it, they were scared to go get cut off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very reasonable, thing that they did. And so in leadership, as an individual, the collective, from an authoritative, whether it be our shepherds or somebody that's over a particular area, we've got to be able to see see the potential in what people are seeing.
That's right.
Understanding what their purpose is and doing it, because they had pure motives behind this. It wasn't any kind of, what are you going to say, like ulterior motive.
That's right. So that's another, main thing is I want us to realize that in a sense, in the church, we're all leaders and we all need to be looking out for each other. And in whatever way it may be, either they're doing something good and the way we can help them, or if we might see that someone is struggling, if there's a problem, we need to help them. Either way it goes, we're all leaders and we need to be looking to help each other. So let's talk about what is a leader. Let's turn to Mark chapter 10 and look at verses 42 through 45. Mark 10, 42 through 45. And Jesus gives us a real good description here of what a leader is. It says, but Jesus called them to himself and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So the word servant there is it's an attendant, a table waiter, a waitress, a waiter, or just someone doing a task for another. The word slave or bondservant, depends on what translation you're in, is a servant. But this bondservant or this slave, his will has been completely surrendered to another master or to a master. So to be a great servant, we need to be what? A slave. A slave to who? To God. To God first, to Christ first. So to be a leader requires us to humble ourselves. We need to first be a servant and slave to God. And second, who do we need to be a servant and slave for? If God and Jesus, God, Jesus, and Holy Spirit are first, who needs to be second? Our fellow man. I put down the church, each other, right? That, we need to be serving each other.
Yeah, that's Galatians 6:9.
Yes.
Therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith.
That's right. Now, I have said this many times. Why do we need to show the world that we love each other? What's the main reason we need to show the world that the church, why do we love each other? Or that we love each other? Set the example. What's another thing?
God says that the world will believe.
That's right. That's right. If someone visitor come here today, and nobody spoke to each other, we all just come in here and sat down, and we just kind of went through the motions, and there was no laughing, no talking, no fellowship. Man, they like, man, would they want to be a part of this? No. What's 1 Peter 1:21 teach? Those people seen the love of the church, and they wanted to be part of that love, and that's what led them to obeying the gospel, right? Because they want to see the love. So we need to serve the church. If you want to, we're all leaders. We need to serve each other and serve the church first, and in doing so, others want to become part of the church, of the kingdom. So who is our greatest example of a leader? Jesus Christ. He humbled himself, right? He came here, into this earth, and he did what? He served. A lot of times we think about him, washing the feet and whatnot, but the ultimate service he done, he come here, he went to that cross. He served as our sacrifice for our sins. He paid the ultimate price for us through the cross. What are some characteristics of a leader? What are some things that when you think about a leader, what are some things or some qualities you think a good leader should have?
Putting the needs of others ahead of your own.
Okay.
Moral courage.
Moral courage. Okay.
Ability to communicate.
Say it again.
Ability to communicate.
Yes, they need to communicate. We're gonna get that a little bit next about communication. Ability, that's a real good one, because if you can't communicate well, you're not going to be a good server. What about, as a leader, are they worried about how much respect or leverage that they have gained in a week's time? Or is a quality of a leader, should they be more worried about how many burdens they have lifted throughout the week? Have they taken off another brother or sister in Christ? Or have they lightened, someone's load? Do you think about that as a leader in the church? They're not worried about the respect that they have or all these other things. They're just more worried about, have they helped someone out this week? A leader is not someone who is looking for some platform or some soapbox to stand on top of. They're one that just is looking in practical ways that I can help someone out. I done a lesson down at camp last year. We was in the fellowship hall, or not the fellowship hall. What does he call it? Mess hall, yeah, mess hall. I don't know why I said fellowship. But anyways, we got in there, and it was a late night when I turned all the lights off, and I had one of them turn the lights on. Did you hear the light come on? So the thing is, does light make a noise? If we turn out all these rooms, all these lights off in this room, and I lit just a little candle, we're going to be able to see that light. We don't have to have some platform. We don't have to be standing on some big soapbox. Just light up the room. Just light it up. And light does not make a noise when we turn it on. It just quietly lights up the whole room. So just to be a leader, you don't have to be the loudest person. You don't have to be making a whole lot of noise. You can just live a quiet life and lead just fine. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the product, so many times we try to make them, put them on a pedestal. We're thinking they're infallible, but they're human. Leaders in the church, like the elders and deacons, sure, they've taken on a lot of responsibility on the hope that they pursue in this office. But we need, as fellow Christians, we need to understand that these people are human too. And they need guidance, they need help, just like we do. At times, they may be having trouble doing it. They may be in trouble with some problems. But we do expect them to be good examples. That's yes, we do. But we just need to understand as fellow brothers and sisters, these people are human too. They need help. They need friendship. They need guidance. We just don't want to put them on a pedestal like they did priests. Infallible.
Yeah, exactly right. Think about that. He brought up a good point, or he made me think of something. When's the last time any one of us have reached out to one of the elders or deacons and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Or any of the evangelists here, "How are you doing?" Because so many times it's really easy for us to go to them with all our issues or our problems. But have you ever thought about being a leader in the church and going to one of them and asking them, "Hey, how are you? Do you need an ear to talk to?" So that's something, good point. Good point. They need help as well. Another thing about a good leader is, a good leader, they're not looking for nothing in return, right? A good leader just does stuff just to do stuff because they see something that needs to be done and they just do it. And they freely give up their time and their effort. And a lot of times they expect nothing in return. So again, I'm going to ask you, who all can be or who all is Who can be a servant in the church? Who can be a leader in the church? Who can be? Not everybody wants. Anybody. All of us can. That's us. What is 1 Peter 2:9? Really, you can start back at verse 5. It says, you also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And then verse 9, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, His own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. So who is the leaders in the church? All of us can be. All of us can be these leaders. All Christians. We're all part of this priesthood. If you've obeyed the gospel and you are in the church now, you're in the priesthood. And we're called to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world. Right? So, what about Matthew chapter 5 and 13 through 16? 13 through 16. Yeah, it says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world, a city set on a hill that cannot be hidden. Nor do they light up a lamp and put it under a basket, but a lampstand, and gives light to all who are in the house. Well, sometimes I try to look at verses. I think the house here is referring to the whole world, but what if we look at it as far as the house being the church? You ever thought about it that way, or looked at it from that perspective? You know, the house. You know, sometimes there's some congregations in the church that are struggling, right? Or think about if you go visit another congregation, you could be that light in that congregation. Does anybody got anything to add before we move on?
One good thing I like to think of, what we all want to hear when we get to heaven. Well done, good and faithful leader.
Enter in. Right.
That's
right. That's right. That's something we should all be.
Got to think about being a servant.
That's
right. And if you can't think that way, you're going to have a rough time.
Real rough time. Real rough time. All right, so I got some, in the world, a leader's primary goal is to lord over others, and, he wants to exercise his authority. I worked in the oil field for many, many years overseas, and I was a night tool pusher, and, I was second in command, and, when it comes 6 o'clock hit, I was it. And, there were some of those guys over there, I could do no wrong. It's like, I just walked around there. That's how it was. But then some of those guys realized real quick, like when it come time to clean out the mud pits and whatnot, I was one of the first ones going in with a water hose and squeegee to help clean it, right? They looked at me differently. I led differently. I tried to serve everybody there. I tried to serve others and become, part of the team. That's kind of the idea of the kingdom or the church. We need to learn to serve others and become the slave to all people. Another thing in the world, a leader, they're looking for, they're worried more about their title, their rank, how many people they control, and are they getting recognized? But in the kingdom, what does the Bible teach us that a leader should be looking for, or should have? Humility, the willing to sacrifice everything for someone else, and how useful they are to God.
And I'll just tell you this is an interesting thing, because men love titles. And whenever I go to somewhere or whatever, these events, and one of the most common questions I get asked is, how should we introduce you? And I said, can you just say Chris? And I cannot tell you, if you guys see me on the radio, TV, or any of those things like that, they cannot not do that. They will introduce me, that they have to do it. Like, this is Pastor Chris Donovan or something like that. They just cannot get off of that. And I even tell them, like I'm not going to sit there and have the whole pastor conversation with them or something like that. But it's just, we feel like that there's some kind of credential that comes with the title. And I get that's true to some degree, right? I mean, you need to distinguish positions, right? But the reality of the situation is that, we see, Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I draw all men to me. John 12:13 or whatever it was. So the funny thing about the world is that they're just always going to be like that. You can't get around that. But that still doesn't mean that you have to, you get a chance to define the position.
You reminded me of, I'll get to you. You have to holler at me. You're way over there. You remind me of something, how you want to be introduced. You ever been to a gospel meeting or somewhere, and a lot of times the preachers go in the back, there's people gathered in the back, everybody's going out, and it's, hey Chris, hey this, hey this, and brother VP, how you doing? The preacher, right? The preacher out, everybody, he's the only one that's going to get called brother so-and-so. When in a sense, we're all brothers, these titles that we have, and as you've always said, we've got these professional Christians that we got up here, we put them up here, we put them on a pedestal sometimes. Go ahead.
Well, I'll move on to my point, but on Chris's point, I spoke at my grandmother's funeral. I basically preached at my grandmother's funeral, and after I got called reverend and pastor and all that. And I mean, it was. I mean, again, you're not going to break it down, do a whole 45-minute lesson with them, but it is. I mean, it was kind of funny just to.
Oh yeah.
They just can't get past it. That's probably the best statement there. Let me ask you one quick thing, because you talked about when you were on these oil rigs, you're describing what we would call the halo effect. Like these young guys, they see you and they want to be you. Like you're down the line professionally where they would love to be, and they just think, like you said, I could do no wrong. Is that about right?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever mess up in front of them?
Oh.
Right.
We ain't got enough time today.
One of the things you can do that really gets you a lot of, credibility with your people, one thing I learned is when I messed up, they all knew it already. So the best thing for me to do is just say, hey, I messed up there. Here's what I got to do to fix it. I'm in the Army, right? Like I'm no less in charge. I'm still your platoon sergeant or your whatever, but it almost gave me credibility to be able to say, hey, I messed that up and I've got to take accountability for it. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it, and then address it. And then again, when you mess up tomorrow, I'm going to confront you about it.
That's right.
Did you ever have those circumstances?
Oh yeah, a lot of times. Trust me. I've like I said, I ain't got enough time to talk about all the stuff I've messed up working over yonder.
I think being very clear about, hey, I messed this up. Here's the impact from it, and here's how I'm going to work to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I need your help on that. When you ask a subordinate to help you, to keep you accountable, oh, you got somebody very loyal at that point.
That's very true. So another thing about leaders in the world, what is which way are they always worried about going? Up. They want to go up that ladder. They want to move up the ladder and whatnot. So what about in the kingdom? What about the church? Which way should leaders be wanting to go? Right? We want to get down, descending and serving and seeking out other one's needs. I do think that's one reason why Jesus, the cleaning of feet, right? He got it to the lowest point of them, and cleaned their dirty feet. Pretty good example. And a lot of times in the world, a leader, they're more worried about, they're not worried about the people, right? They don't mind consuming people to build this empire. They don't care how many people they lose, but as long as their empire is number one and on top, they don't mind. But a leader in the church should be more worried about lifting people up to build the church, to build the body, to lift it up. So,
read the story Jesus said about the Pharisees. They always want the best seats in the synagogue and all that kind of stuff,
very, very, very true.
They are big time hypocrites.
Yes, very much so. All right, so now let's turn to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew 7, 24 through 27. Next few moments, we're going to talk about three spheres of Christian leadership. The first one is self-leadership. Self-leadership. So Matthew chapter 7 and 24 through 27, I'm pretty sure we all know these verses. It says, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken to him a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. And it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. So what's the point of this story here as far as being a leader, a self-leader, self-leadership? Where does it begin?
Who you listen to.
Sir?
It's not who you listen to, but it's who you submit to.
Who you're submitting to?
Both of these folks heard him,
Heard him?
but only one of them listened to him.
That's right. So to be a good leader in the church, we need to first realize that it starts with yourself. It starts with you first. What is your foundation built on? Who have you been listening to? Who are you submitting to? Who are you serving? If you don't have a good foundation yourself, you say this a lot, Chris, if you're not leading your house, who is? Satan is.
With this, are you doing these things even when nobody else sees it?
Yes.
Am I actually submitting to Christ for His pleasure, or so people look at me and they'll be pleased with me on the outside of the men around me?
That's right. Good. Very good point. So, Chris always says, I've heard him say this multiple times, if you're not leading your house, men, fathers, Satan's going to do it. So could we not take that same saying that he says, and men, leaders, if we're not the one leading this congregation, who's leading it? And we can look at it both ways, right? If we're not the ones leading this congregation, he's leading it for us. Satan's leading it. So we need to make sure that we are the ones leading this congregation and not the devil. Another thing is, another quote, Alan Murray, he said a couple, last week before, he said somebody asked him, would your faith save so-and-so? Right? It always starts with us. Think about it that way. Would my faith save the congregation? Would your faith save the congregation? That's only something each one of you can answer. And if you're kind of thinking about it, we may need to do some self-examination on everybody's part, right? 1 Timothy 3, 2 through 5 talks about self-control and domestic governance is part of being a good leader. Now, I do know that it's talking about elders in this context, and it is, and that's what it's all about. And the next few we're going to look at is really talking about elders or deacons. But one day, if you just got the time, sit down and look at all the qualifications for elders and look at all the qualifications for deacons, and see if you meet that. See if you meet those qualifications, because in reality, every Christian should strive to meet those qualifications. We should all strive to meet those same qualifications that the elders have. We should want that. Titus 1, 7 through 8, being a good leader, it rests on self-discipline, right? Your emotions need to be stable. You can't be, all over the place. And you have to have moral integrity, as, he mentioned earlier, right? 1 Timothy 4, 12 through 16 says we must see that being a good leader begins with self, and leaders lead by example, not just by mere commands. Because I'm going to tell you, I mentioned I worked in oil field. A lot of times I realized, I could pick up that phone and call up to the rig floor with some of those guys and tell them to do something over the phone and hang up, and I go out an hour later, and guess what? It ain't done. I learned real quick, I need to get my boots on and go out there and check on them and make sure it's getting done and help them, get them going, get them started. We have to lead by example. Is there a rank? Yes, there is ranks. But leading's not about age, and it's not about being a male or a female, right? What we're talking about here. We can all lead. We can all lead.
God takes that very seriously. I mean, you know, you just think about all the Old Testament stories, accounts, lessons of people rebelling against the leadership. I mean, look at the children of Israel. I mean, literally, nobody enters the promised land. I mean, you know, everybody under the age of 20, you know, them old boys just got to be counting, you know, like 19. How close am I to that number?
Yeah.
Right? Because nobody will enter the promised land. And it's all because, so God takes respect for leadership because he has a hierarchy very seriously. I mean, if you reference Titus chapter 1 at verse 5, it says, for this reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are lacking and appoint elders in every city as I've commanded you. God expects that.
That's right.
He expects a leadership, authoritative, titled, credentialed, whatever you want to say, position, so that there's clear distinction in the church.
That's right.
And because of that, you know, you look at Timothy's or Titus's. Titus, he deals with the leaders before he deals with the problem. In Timothy's account, he deals with the problems, and then he says, now appoint leaders. And so, you know, it takes both. You can't necessarily take Brian, Chip, and Tom from here and set them equipment and let them be shepherds of the congregation there.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that the qualifications are subjective, but I just mean that the men that are in those positions need to understand that that's a serious position, and that we as the church need to understand that that's a serious authority.
That's right. It is. You know, and you said something that brought something to my mind. Now it's done left me. I'll remember it tonight when I'm laying down on my bed. So, what's the danger of untrained self-leadership?
Well, there's no standard.
No standard?
You know, I mean, you go down there to the 5-year-old class, it's 12 of them in there, and you say, one of y'all be the leader. Everyone's gonna stick their hand up, and they're all gonna have their own standard by which they lead by.
And you can hopefully they stick their hands up.
But you know what I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just because there's no standard if there's an untrained. I mean, every man does what's right in his own eyes.
Along with what Chris was saying, those positions, especially elders, they're not just appointed by the congregation only. These positions are desired. The individual has to have a desire to do those positions. And like Chris was saying, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that the other brothers and sisters in church don't see. I mean, these people, we're at home watching a movie, their home is open, their phones is open, their doors are open to things that they're doing while we're sitting at home watching a movie or something. They're out, you know, with trying to solve issues or being with a fellow Christian or you know, discussing the Bible or having a discussion with another person that's not a member of the church.
That's right.
I mean, what I'm trying to say, these people, their doors are open 24 hours a day. Not because they feel like they have to, but it's because they want to. They love it. They love the Lord, and they do what needs to be done because they want to.
Exactly. So, untrained self-leadership, spiritual correction of others without initial self-screening leads to hypocrisy and blindness. 1 Corinthians 9:27. You know, if you're a leader, you need to have you need to be trained. So, where am I at? So let's talk about leading quietly. I looked up, when I was studying this, I come across something that I didn't know why. Once I got to realize what it was, I know what this is. Photoacoustic conversion. Does anybody know what that is? Photoacoustic conversion. Anybody ever had an MRI? Stuff like that, right? Okay. That's the physical process of turning absorbed light into energy into sound or ultrasonic waves. That's what it is. That leads back to what I asked earlier. When you turn a light on, does it make a sound? Does it make a sound? Does light make a sound? That's what this really is. So can we actually hear light? Can you hear it? No, we can't. So a trait of a good leader is, or what is their initiative? Are they leading to be heard or seen? Good leaders take the light that God is, right? Because He is light. And that light has been absorbed into them, and they let the whole world see it, or they let the church see it. I mean, it's just something that happens. We should let God's light be seen through us. That's photoacoustic conversion. That is where people can see the light, but they necessarily don't hear it, right? Leaders also lead when they're not asked. Just, good leaders do not always have to be heard. The third sphere was leading through discipleship, right? Hebrews 10, 24 to 25, we use this a lot of times when we want to point fingers at someone not coming to church, right? Not coming to assembly. Well, we just need to realize that leaders show up, right? I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm not trying to count heads, who's here, who's not. I'm just trying to make the point that to be a leader in the church, you have to be there. And we also need to realize that, and it says that when you're assembling together, it doesn't always necessarily, it's not just on Sundays and Wednesdays. It can be for anything. Just be together. If you cannot lead if you're not there, you just cannot do it. It's not possible. You have to be here. How can a leader stir someone up if they're never around? So, church, if you want to be a leader, you have to be here. You have to be here or be there, wherever. So, any questions? Any comments? We only got a few minutes left. So, some practical application for us, or some take homes. We need to be a leader in the church. First off, you need to be in the church. That's number one, right? Andrew preached up in Quitman back over the summer. Said the best time to obey the gospel was yesterday. Second best time is today, right? So you got to be in the church. So we need to practice, notice, and act. Basically, if you see a need, feel a need. If you see something that needs to be done, take care of it. Get up and do it. Even if it's just, if there's someone here that's lost a loved one and they have sat in this pew for 20 or 30 years with their spouse or, whatever beside them, and they have passed away, be a leader. Fill that pew. Fill that empty seat next to them. Love on them a little bit. That's the way that we can lead. See a need, feel a need. If there's a ministry that's going on here, help them out. Help them out. I've already talked about sitting with, lonely brothers and sisters. Somebody's just lonely. If you notice they're sitting by themselves, go sit beside them and love on them a little bit. Another thing for you to work on is lead the atmosphere. Lead the atmosphere. The culture or the atmosphere within the church is set by the church that is sitting in these pews, right? And again, if we have visitors coming here and the atmosphere is terrible, it's not, we're fussing, we're fighting, they're not going to be part of this church. Another, leaders lead in their own spiritual growth. We need to quit relying on Sunday sermons or Wednesday devotionals to be your only spiritual nourishment. You need to take the time to pick up your own Bible and study your own Bibles and get God's Word in you so you can become a good leader. Leaders also dirty up their own knees in prayer. So leaders, you need to, if you want to be a good leader, you need to work on your own spiritual growth. We need to mentor one person. Find one of these new converts and help them out. Help a weaker brother that in the faith. Help them out with their faith. Leaders seek people who need help and take them out to eat, or just simply call up, hey, you want to go get some coffee? Or can I just come hang out with you? Okay? Another one I want to ask before we go. Will we succeed as being leaders in the church? Will we succeed? How will we succeed? If you read Acts chapter 1 and look at the first 8 verses, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit's mentioned twice each in the first 8 verses. The early church had problems, right? But God, it was surrounded by God, and it succeeded. So if you ever ask yourself, are we going to succeed here at KW or the church? As long as we give all our problems to God, we're going to make it. Thank y'all for y'all's time.